Hey, my friend, let me ask you something. When was the last time someone's words stuck to you like glue? Maybe it was a casual comment from a coworker. Maybe your partner's tone at breakfast. Maybe a text message that never came. And suddenly, your whole day shifted. Your mood changed. Your confidence wobbled. You started replaying conversations in your mind like a detective searching for clues about what you did wrong. Here's the thing most people don't realize. That invisible weight crushing your chest right now, that knot in your stomach, that voice in your head questioning everything you said and did, none of it is actually about you. And I know that sounds impossible. I know it feels deeply, painfully personal. But stay with me, because what I'm about to share will fundamentally change how you move through the world. Most of us spend our entire lives carrying around an invisible backpack, except instead of books and supplies, it's filled with everyone else's opinions, their moods, their judgments, their reactions, their problems. We collect these things like stones, adding them to our load one by one until we're bent over from the weight of burdens that were never ours to carry in the first place. Think about your last week. Really think about it. How many times did someone's silence make you anxious? How many times did a critical comment send you spiraling into self-doubt? How many hours did you spend analyzing why someone seemed distant, trying to figure out what you could have possibly done to upset them? How much energy did you waste worrying about someone's opinion of you? Now, here's the heartbreaking truth. While you were losing sleep over what they thought, they probably weren't thinking about you at all. They were dealing with their own stress, their own problems, their own internal chaos. But somehow, you made their behavior a mirror that reflected your worth. And that mirror lied to you. This pattern is destroying you. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because it's true. Every time you absorb someone else's mood like a sponge, every time you twist yourself into shapes trying to avoid criticism, every time you let someone's bad day become your emotional reality, you're giving away pieces of yourself, your peace, your confidence, your energy, your authenticity. The person you are meant to be gets buried under layers of other people's stuff. But here's the beautiful truth that changes everything. You can stop. You can learn to let things roll off you like rain off a window. You can develop the ability to stay centered and calm regardless of what's happening around you. You can build such strong internal foundations that external storms can't knock you over anymore. By the time we're done together, you'll understand exactly why people behave the way they do, how to protect your emotional space, and most importantly, how to never again let someone else's chaos become your inner crisis. You'll learn to distinguish between what's truly yours to handle and what belongs to other people. And that distinction will set you free in ways you can't even imagine right now. Chapter 1. Why your heart takes everything so personally. Let's start with something that might sting a little. Your emotional system is working exactly as it was designed. The problem is, it was designed for a world that no longer exists. Your brain comes equipped with an ancient alarm system that's been passed down through thousands of generations. Back when your ancestors lived in small tribes, being rejected wasn't just emotionally painful, it was a death sentence. If the group turned against you, if they criticized you, if they pushed you out, you would literally die alone in the wilderness. So your brain developed an incredibly sophisticated early warning system designed to catch even the slightest hint of social rejection. This system kept your ancestors alive, but now, in the modern world, it's keeping you miserable. Here's how it works in your everyday life. Someone at work gives you feedback about your presentation. Your modern, rational brain knows this is just professional input meant to help you improve. But your ancient emotional brain screams, danger, rejection, survival threat. Your heart rate spikes. Your stomach clenches. Stress hormones flood your system, all because your primitive alarm system can't tell the difference between constructive criticism and being expelled from the tribe to die. Your friend takes 3 hours to respond to your text. Logically, you know they're probably just busy. They might be in a meeting. Their phone might be dead. They might have read it and genuinely forgot to reply. But your emotional brain doesn't consider reasonable explanations. It immediately jumps to the worst-case scenario. They're ignoring me. They're angry. I did something wrong. They don't care about me anymore. Someone seems quiet or distant around you. Your rational mind could wonder, what's happening in their life? Are they stressed, tired, dealing with personal issues? But instead, your emotional system automatically assumes their mood is a response to you. You did something. You said something. There's something wrong with you that's making them pull away. This is what psychologists call the fundamental attribution error. And it's running your life without your permission. You constantly attribute other people's behavior to your own actions, your own words, your own inadequacies. Meanwhile, when you're having a bad day, you know it's because of your stress, your problems, your circumstances, but you don't extend that same understanding to others. Think about this honestly. When you're overwhelmed at work, when you're worried about money, when you're dealing with family drama, when you're exhausted or anxious or going through something difficult, how much mental energy are you actually spending thinking about other people? How much time do you dedicate to judging or criticizing others? Probably almost none. You're completely absorbed in your own world, your own struggles, your own fears. Your bandwidth is maxed out, just managing your own life. Yet when someone else seems upset or acts differently toward you, you immediately assume it's because they're thinking about you, judging you, upset with you, when the reality is they're probably just as absorbed in their own world as you are in yours. This is what I call the self-centered misunderstanding. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. It's not that you're selfish or narcissistic. It's that your own experience is the only one you have direct access to. You live inside your own head. You feel your own feelings. You know your own thoughts. But you can't see inside anyone else's mind. So you fill in the blanks with assumptions, and those assumptions are almost always wrong. Here's another layer that makes this worse. Your brain has a built-in confirmation bias. Once it decides on a story about why someone is upset or distant, it starts looking for evidence to support that story. You'll notice every small slight, every moment of perceived rejection, every instance of criticism. Meanwhile, you'll completely overlook all the positive interactions, all the signs that people actually like and respect you, all the evidence that contradicts your negative narrative. The result? You walk through life in a constant state of social anxiety. always monitoring, always worrying, always ready to take the blame for things that have nothing to do with you. And this hypervigilance is exhausting. It makes you either defensive and reactive or withdrawn and people-pleasing. Neither response actually serves you or improves your relationships. Your brain also has what I call a negativity magnet. 10 people can compliment you, but one person's criticism will haunt you for weeks. 10 interactions can go smoothly, but one awkward moment will replay in your mind on an endless loop. This isn't because you're broken or damaged. It's because your survival system is wired to pay more attention to potential threats than to positive experiences. In the ancient world, missing a compliment didn't kill you, but missing a sign of social rejection could. So your brain evolved to be hyper-alert to anything that might indicate you're losing social standing or being pushed out of the group. That same mechanism now makes you obsess over one negative comment while barely registering dozens of positive ones. Understanding this neuroscience is the first step to freedom. When you realize that your emotional reactions are often based on ancient programming rather than current reality, you can start to question those reactions instead of automatically believing them. You can begin to separate what's actually happening from what your threat detection system thinks is happening. The initial surge of emotion you feel when someone criticizes you or seems distant, that's not reliable information about the situation. That's your brain perceiving a potential threat and activating your stress response. It's doing its job of trying to keep you safe. But in the modern world, most of these perceived threats aren't real dangers. They're just your ancient wiring misinterpreting normal human interactions. Once you understand this, you can start to pause between the trigger and your reaction. You can start to ask better questions. Is this really about me, or is this my threat detection system overreacting? What else could explain this person's behavior? Am I making assumptions based on fear rather than facts? This awareness doesn't make the initial emotional reaction disappear. You'll still feel that spike of anxiety or hurt, but you won't have to believe it. You won't have to let it dictate your behavior or define your reality. You can acknowledge the feeling while recognizing it for what it is, an outdated alarm system going off in response to something that isn't actually dangerous. Your brain is wired to make everything about you, but just because it's wired that way doesn't mean you have to live that way. You can learn to work with your neuroscience instead of being controlled by it. You can develop the ability to notice your automatic reactions without being ruled by them. This is the foundation of emotional freedom. Not eliminating your reactions, but understanding them well enough that they don't have power over you anymore. Not becoming emotionless, but becoming wise enough to distinguish between what your ancient brain fears and what's actually true in your modern life. Chapter 2. The 4 masks people wear when they attack. Now that you understand why your brain is primed to take things personally, let's talk about what's really happening when people criticize, judge, or hurt you. Because once you can see through people's behavior to what's actually driving it, you'll never take their words personally again. There are 4 main patterns that look like personal attacks, but are actually revealing everything about the other person and nothing about you. Learn to spot these patterns, and you'll develop X-ray vision for human behavior. Pattern 1. The mirror attack. This is when someone criticizes you for something they're secretly struggling with themselves. It's like they're holding up a mirror to their own flaws, but they've convinced themselves they're looking at you. The colleague who constantly questions whether you're working hard enough. They're usually drowning in anxiety about their own productivity. The friend who keeps hinting that you're being selfish. They're probably wrestling with guilt about their own self-centered choices. The family member who won't stop commenting on your life being chaotic. They're typically feeling out of control in their own world. This happens because people can't stand seeing their own weaknesses reflected back at them. Their subconscious mind goes hunting for those same flaws in other people. When they think they've found them, they attack with unusual intensity. The emotion behind their criticism is way too big for the situation because they're not just criticizing you. They're trying to reject the parts of themselves they can't accept. Here's how you spot a mirror attack. The emotional intensity is completely disproportionate. If someone gets unusually angry about something relatively minor, if their reaction seems way bigger than the situation deserves, you're probably witnessing their internal battle, not an accurate assessment of your behavior. They're not mad at you. They're mad at themselves. You just happen to trigger their unresolved feelings about their own struggles. Pattern 2. The ricochet attack. This is when someone's frustration about one situation bounces off and hits you, even though you had nothing to do with the original problem. Like a ricochet bullet, their emotional energy was aimed somewhere else, but you're the one who got hit. Your manager had a brutal argument with their spouse this morning, so suddenly your perfectly fine presentation gets torn apart. Your friend is stressed about money, so they snap at you for being 10 minutes late. Your parent is dealing with health worries, so they become irritable and critical with everyone around them. This happens because most people never learned how to process their emotions in healthy ways. When they're upset about something they can't control or don't want to face directly, that emotional energy has to go somewhere. Unfortunately, it usually lands on the safest, most available target, which is often the people closest to them who won't abandon them for having a bad day. The telltale sign of a ricochet attack is timing and context. If someone's behavior toward you has suddenly shifted, look at what else is happening in their world. New stress at work, relationship problems, financial pressure, health concerns, family drama. Their treatment of you probably has everything to do with their inability to handle their real problems and nothing to do with anything you've actually done. Pattern 3. The comparison attack. This is when someone puts you down to lift themselves up. It's like they're standing on your shoulders trying to feel taller, not realizing that diminishing others never actually increases their own height. The person who constantly points out your mistakes is usually desperate to distract from their own. The friend who makes subtle digs about your accomplishments is dealing with their own feelings of falling behind. The family member who criticizes your choices is often questioning whether their own decisions were right. Here's the psychological truth. Secure people don't tear others down. Happy people don't try to make others unhappy. Successful people don't waste energy criticizing others' success. When someone consistently tries to make you feel bad about yourself, it's because they feel bad about themselves. Your confidence threatens their fragile self-image. The pattern to watch for: consistency. If someone regularly finds fault with you, if they can never seem to be genuinely happy for your wins, if they always have something negative to say, you're dealing with someone whose self-esteem is so fragile that your mere existence challenges it. Their criticism isn't feedback about you. It's a window into their inner pain. Pattern 4. The control attack. This is when someone gets upset with you for not following rules you never agreed to. They've created an entire rule book in their head about how people should behave, how relationships should work, how situations should be handled, and they expect you to follow their script without ever actually sharing it with you. Your friend is angry because you didn't call back within their expected time frame, even though you never promised to be available 24/7. Your family member is disappointed because you made a choice they wouldn't make, even though it's your life to live. Your colleague is frustrated because you didn't handle something their way, even though you achieved the same result. The hallmark of a control attack is the phrase, "you should have," or "you were supposed to," followed by something you never actually agreed to do. When someone is mad at you for not reading their mind, for not prioritizing what they would prioritize, for not handling something exactly the way they would, they're not upset with you. They're upset that they can't control you, and that discomfort with their own powerlessness is being directed at you. Understanding these 4 patterns is genuinely life-changing because when you can identify projection, ricochet, comparison, and control in someone's behavior, you stop taking it personally. You start seeing it for what it really is: information about their internal world, not a verdict on your worth as a person. You can respond with understanding instead of defensiveness, boundaries instead of blame, compassion instead of counterattacks. You can protect yourself without absorbing their pain as your own truth. Chapter 3. What this pattern is: stealing from your life. Before we dive into how to stop taking things personally, you need to see the full picture of what this habit is actually costing you. Because until you understand the true price tag attached to absorbing everyone else's emotions and making their issues about you, you won't have enough motivation to break this deeply ingrained pattern. Let's start with your mental health, because this is where the damage runs deepest. Every single time you take something personally, you're essentially hijacking your own nervous system. Your stress hormones spike like you just encountered a physical threat. Your heart starts pounding. Your breathing gets shallow and rapid. Cortisol and adrenaline flood through your veins. Your body goes into survival mode over something that isn't even a real danger to your safety or well-being. Now multiply this response by every perceived slight, every confusing interaction, every moment of criticism you encounter in a single day. Someone makes a comment, and you spend the next 2 hours mentally dissecting what you might have done wrong. Someone doesn't text back, and you spiral into 3 different catastrophic explanations. Someone seems off, and you replay every conversation you've had with them, searching desperately for the moment you offended them. Your nervous system is constantly activated. constantly on high alert, constantly preparing for threats that don't actually exist. This isn't just uncomfortable. This is literally rewiring your brain for anxiety and depression. When you repeatedly take things personally, you're training your neural pathways to see danger everywhere. You're conditioning your brain to interpret neutral situations as negative, to default to self-blame and self-doubt. You're creating mental highways that make it easier and easier to feel terrible about yourself and harder to feel confident and secure. The impact on your relationships is equally devastating, though often invisible until it's too late. When you take everything personally, you become exhausting to be around. Not because you're a bad person, but because people start walking on eggshells around you. They become afraid that anything they say might trigger an emotional reaction. They begin avoiding difficult conversations because they know you'll spiral and make their problem about comforting you instead. They stop giving you honest feedback because they've learned that you can't handle criticism without falling apart or getting defensive. But here's where it gets even more insidious. When you consistently take things personally, you train the people in your life to manage your emotions instead of their own. Your friends stop sharing when they're having a rough day because you'll assume it's somehow your fault and create more drama than they started with. Your colleagues stop mentioning their stress because you'll interpret it as criticism of your performance. Your partner can't express their own feelings without you making those feelings about your inadequacy. This pattern suffocates intimacy because real intimacy requires the ability to hold space for someone else's emotions without making those emotions about you. When your partner is stressed about work, you need to be able to listen and support them without spiraling into, are they really upset with me? When your friend is going through a crisis, you need to be able to show up for them without making their pain about whether you're being a good enough friend. Taking things personally also murders your ability to grow and improve. When someone offers you constructive feedback, instead of hearing it as valuable information that could help you level up, you hear it as an attack on your character. You become defensive, argumentative, or you shut down completely. You miss opportunities to develop new skills, to see your blind spots, to become better at what you do, all because you're too busy protecting your ego from imaginary attacks. Your career suffers tremendously. Leadership requires making decisions based on facts and data, not on whether those decisions might hurt someone's feelings or make them think less of you. It requires having difficult conversations, giving honest feedback, setting clear boundaries. When you take things personally, you avoid conflict like it's poison. You people please your way into ineffectiveness. You make decisions based on what will make people like you rather than what will actually get results. Even your physical body is paying the price. The chronic stress from constantly taking things personally leads to headaches that won't quit, insomnia that leaves you exhausted, digestive problems that make eating uncomfortable, muscle tension that settles into your shoulders and neck like cement, a weakened immune system that leaves you vulnerable to every bug going around. You're literally making yourself sick by absorbing other people's emotional weather and making their storms your internal climate. Perhaps most tragically, taking things personally prevents you from ever developing genuine, unshakable self-worth. Instead of building confidence from your own values, your own growth, your own achievements, you become an emotional beggar, constantly dependent on other people's approval for your self-esteem. Your mood swings wildly based on how others treat you. Your confidence rises and falls based on external validation. You become a puppet, and everyone around you is holding strings they don't even know they're pulling. You give them complete control over how you feel about yourself, and then you wonder why you feel so powerless in your own life. This creates a vicious cycle that's hard to escape. The more you take things personally, the more insecure you become. The more insecure you become, the more likely you are to interpret neutral situations as threats. The more threats you perceive, the more defensive and reactive you become. The more defensive and reactive you are, the more actual conflict you create, which then validates your fears and makes you take things even more personally. Round and round you go, getting more anxious, more defensive, more exhausted with each cycle. But here's what makes this pattern particularly dangerous. It disguises itself as caring. It feels like you're taking things personally because you care so much about your relationships, because you want to do well at work, because you're a sensitive, empathetic person. You tell yourself this sensitivity is a gift, a sign that you're emotionally intelligent and deeply connected to others. But that's not what's actually happening. What's really happening is that you're avoiding the hard work of building genuine self-worth. You're choosing the familiar pain of self-doubt and people-pleasing over the unfamiliar challenge of standing in your own truth and letting others be responsible for their own emotions. You're hiding behind false humility and excessive responsibility-taking instead of doing the real work of developing authentic confidence and healthy relationships. You're letting fear masquerade as compassion, and it's costing you everything. The price of taking things personally is nothing less than your peace of mind, your authentic self, your healthy relationships, and your ability to show up fully in your own life. And you've been paying this price for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to be free. Chapter 4. What people's behavior actually tells you. Here's a truth that will fundamentally shift your entire reality. What people say and do is always about them. Never about you, always. I know that sounds too simple to be true, but it's not just a comforting platitude. It's a fundamental principle of human psychology that, once you truly absorb it, will liberate you from the prison of taking things personally. Let me break down exactly what this means and why it's true. Every single person you encounter is operating from their own unique cocktail of past experiences, current stresses, unconscious fears, unhealed wounds, personal insecurities, and deeply held beliefs about themselves and the world. When they interact with you, they're not seeing you clearly. They're seeing you through a kaleidoscope of all their own stuff. Think about it practically. When someone criticizes you harshly, they're not giving you objective truth about your performance or character. They're showing you how they talk to themselves inside their own head. The person who's cruel to others is cruel to themselves. The person who's hypercritical of others is running a harsh internal dialogue about their own flaws. The person who's impatient with others is impatient with their own mistakes. They're not revealing your inadequacies. They're revealing their own patterns of self-treatment. When someone doesn't respond to your message, they're not making a statement about your importance to them. They're dealing with their own relationship to communication, their own overwhelm, their own avoidance patterns. Some people respond instantly because they're anxious or disappointing anyone. Some people take days because they're drowning in obligations. Some people forget entirely because they're distracted by their own crises. None of these responses are about you. They're about their own internal operating system. When someone seems withdrawn or cold, they're not necessarily upset with you. They might be navigating depression, wrestling with anxiety, dealing with family chaos, stressed about money, worried about their health, processing grief, managing 100 different internal struggles that have absolutely nothing to do with your presence or your actions. Their emotional state is a reflection of their inner landscape, not a response to you. Here's another crucial insight that changes everything. People can only give you what they have to give. Someone who doesn't know how to be emotionally supportive can't suddenly become supportive just because you need them to be. Someone who struggles with consistency can't magically become reliable just because you want them to. Someone who never learned healthy communication can't spontaneously start communicating well just because you're frustrated with their approach. This doesn't mean you should accept poor treatment or lower your standards. It means you should understand that other people's limitations are about their own development, their own skills, their own healing journey, not about your worth or what you deserve. When someone can't show up for you the way you need, it's information about their capacity at this moment in time, not a judgment on your value as a person. Let's go deeper into what I call the projection principle, because this is where everything clicks into place. Every criticism, every judgment, every negative comment someone makes about you is actually them telling you about their own inner experience. It's like they're handing you a map of their internal world, but they think they're describing you. The colleague who says you're not working hard enough is probably struggling with their own productivity and feeling insecure about their contribution. The friend who accuses you of being selfish is likely wrestling with guilt about their own self-centered behavior. The family member who says you're making terrible choices is probably questioning their own life decisions. The intensity of someone's reaction to your behavior is directly proportional to how much that behavior pokes at something unresolved in their own psyche. If someone gets disproportionately upset about something small, if their reaction seems way too big for what actually happened, you're looking at their trigger, not your mistake. You've accidentally touched one of their emotional bruises, and they're reacting from that pain. This is why the same behavior gets completely different reactions from different people. You can tell the same joke, and one person laughs while another gets offended. You can use the same direct communication style, and one person appreciates your honesty while another thinks you're being rude. You can make the same life choice, and one person supports you while another criticizes you harshly. The difference isn't in what you did. The difference is in what each person brings to the interaction based on their own history, wounds, and internal narratives. Understanding this principle also explains why people's treatment of you can shift dramatically based on what's happening in their own lives. The friend who's usually supportive might become critical when they're going through their own crisis. The boss, who's normally reasonable, might become difficult when they're under pressure from their own superiors. The family member who's typically loving might become distant when they're dealing with their own pain. These changes aren't about you. They're about their capacity to show up differently when they're struggling. This is also why trying to fix other people's negative behavior by being more perfect never works. If someone is consistently critical, being more perfect won't make them less critical. They'll just find new things to criticize because their criticism is flowing from their own inner critic, not from any objective assessment of your performance. If someone is emotionally unavailable, being more loving won't make them more available. They're unavailable because of their own fears and protective walls, not because you're not lovable enough. Here's the profound shift that happens when you truly internalize this truth. Other people's behavior stops being about you and starts being information about them. Instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" you start asking, "What are they going through?" Instead of wondering, "Why don't they like me?" You start wondering, "What wound of theirs did I accidentally touch?" Instead of thinking, "I need to fix this," you start thinking, "This isn't mine to fix." This doesn't mean you become callous or dismissive of others' feelings. It means you stop taking responsibility for emotions and reactions that aren't yours to manage. It means you can have compassion for their struggles without making those struggles evidence of your inadequacy. It means you can receive feedback without your self-worth being threatened by it. It means you can let people have their reactions without those reactions defining your reality. Chapter 5. Building a foundation that can't be shaken. The reason you take things personally is because your sense of worth is externally dependent. You need other people to validate your value, confirm your lovability, reassure you that you're okay. This makes you incredibly vulnerable to every opinion, every mood, every reaction from the people around you. But what if your worth came from somewhere untouchable? What if you built such a strong foundation of internal value that external criticism couldn't crack it? This is what genuinely confident people understand but rarely talk about. Their self-worth doesn't fluctuate based on external validation. They've done the inner work to build a sense of value that comes from within, that's based on their own relationship with themselves rather than other people's opinions about them. And you can build this too. First, you need to understand the difference between self-esteem and self-worth because most people confuse these two concepts. Self-esteem is how you feel about yourself based on your performance, your achievements, how others treat you. It's conditional and fluctuating. You feel good about yourself when you succeed, when people praise you, when things go well. You feel bad about yourself when you fail, when people criticize you, when things go poorly. Self-worth, on the other hand, is your fundamental belief about your inherent value as a human being. It's not based on what you do, what you achieve, or how others treat you. It's based on the simple fact that you exist, that you're a conscious being capable of growth, love, and contribution. Self-worth is stable. It doesn't change based on external circumstances because it's not dependent on external circumstances. Building true self-worth starts with radical self-acceptance. And I mean accepting yourself completely, including your flaws, your mistakes, your imperfections, the parts of yourself you wish were different. This doesn't mean you stop trying to grow. It means you stop making your growth conditional on your self-acceptance. Most people have it backwards. They think they'll accept themselves once they fix all their problems, once they achieve their goals, once they become the person they think they should be. But it doesn't work that way. Self-acceptance has to come first. You have to love yourself into growth, not hate yourself into change. You have to accept where you are right now as a valid starting point, not as evidence of failure. You have to embrace your humanity, including your limitations and imperfections, as part of what makes you real and relatable and worthy of love. This requires developing a completely new internal voice, a voice that speaks to you with the same kindness, patience, and encouragement you would offer to a dear friend going through a hard time. Most people's internal dialogue is brutal, critical, demanding. They talk to themselves in ways they would never talk to someone they cared about. They set impossible standards and then beat themselves up for not meeting them. But you can change this voice. You can train yourself to speak to yourself with compassion. When you make a mistake, instead of, "I'm so stupid," you can say, "That didn't go well, but I'm learning." When someone criticizes you, instead of, "They're right, I'm not good enough," you can think, "That's their perspective, and I can consider it," without making it define my worth. Building internal worth also means developing a strong value system that guides your decisions regardless of what others think. You need to know what matters to you, what you stand for, what kind of person you want to be. These values become your compass, your internal guidance system that helps you navigate difficult situations without needing external approval. When your values are clear and you're living in alignment with them, other people's opinions become much less important. If someone criticizes you for being too honest, but honesty is one of your core values, their criticism doesn't threaten you because you know you're being true to what matters most to you. Chapter 6. The 3 seconds that change your entire life. There's a tiny space between when something happens and when you react to it. A brief window of opportunity that most people rush right past without even noticing it exists. This moment is where all your power lives. It's where you can choose to take something personally or let it slide off you like water off glass. Master this moment, and you master your emotional life. I call it the 3-second rule, and it's the most practical, immediately usable tool you'll ever learn for protecting your peace. Here's exactly how it works. When someone says or does something that would normally trigger you, instead of immediately reacting, you pause for 3 seconds and ask yourself one simple question. Is this about me, or is this about them? Those 3 seconds are magic because they give your thinking brain time to catch up with your emotional brain. When you're triggered, your amygdala hijacks your entire system and you react from pure emotion instead of wisdom. But if you can create just 3 seconds of space between the trigger and your response, You activate the part of your brain that can actually think clearly about what's happening. In those 3 seconds, you're looking for clues. Is what they're saying or doing consistent with how they treat everyone, or are you being singled out? Are they having a rough day dealing with obvious stress or showing signs of their own emotional struggles? Is their reaction proportionate to what actually happened, or does it seem bigger than the situation warrants? Is this feedback about your actual behavior, or is this them projecting their own insecurities onto you? Let me show you how this works in real situations. Your boss snaps at you during a team meeting. Old, you would immediately start panicking. What did I do wrong? Are they going to fire me? Do they think I'm incompetent? Maybe I should start looking for another job. New you takes 3 seconds and notices. They've been short with everyone this week. They mentioned yesterday that upper management is breathing down their neck about quarterly targets. Their reaction was way too intense for the minor issue they brought up. Conclusion: this is about their stress, not your performance. Your friend hasn't responded to your text for 2 days. Old you would spiral into stories. They're mad at me. I said something wrong. They're probably done with our friendship. I always do this. I always push people away. New you takes 3 seconds and remembers. They just started a demanding new job. They mentioned feeling completely overwhelmed last week. They've always been a slow texter, even in the best of times. Conclusion: this is about their bandwidth, not your friendship. Your family member makes a critical comment about your life choices. Old you would get defensive and hurt. They don't support me. They think I'm failing. Maybe they're right, and I am making a mess of everything. New you takes 3 seconds and recognizes. They've been making similar worried comments to everyone in the family lately. They're going through their own midlife crisis. Their tone suggests more anxiety than actual criticism. Conclusion: this is about their fear, not your choices. The 3-second rule works because it interrupts your automatic pattern. Most people have been taking things personally for so long that it's become completely unconscious. Something happens, they immediately make it about themselves, they react from that assumption, all without any conscious choice involved. But when you pause, even briefly, you give yourself the chance to consider alternative explanations. You create space for wisdom instead of reaction. Here's what's particularly powerful about this technique. It doesn't require you to be perfect or eliminate your initial emotional response. You don't need to stop feeling hurt or confused or upset in that first moment. You just need to pause long enough to question whether that feeling is based on accurate information or on assumptions. You can feel the sting and still recognize that the sting is coming from your interpretation, not necessarily from the other person's intention. The 3-second rule also helps you respond instead of react. And there's a world of difference between these two. When you react, you're operating from emotion, impulse, old patterns. When you respond, you're operating from choice, intention, awareness. Reactions are automatic and often make situations worse. Responses are conscious and usually make things better. During those 3 seconds, you're also choosing where your energy goes. Every time you take something personally, you're handing your emotional power to someone else. You're letting their mood, their opinion, their behavior dictate how you feel. But when you pause and recognize that their behavior is about them, You keep your energy for yourself. You stay centered, grounded, in control of your own emotional weather instead of being tossed around by everyone else's storms. This doesn't mean you become emotionless or disconnected. It means you become discerning. You learn to distinguish between what deserves your emotional energy and what doesn't. You respond appropriately to actual problems while not getting swept away by other people's projections, bad days, or personal struggles. The 3-second rule becomes even more powerful when you combine it with curiosity instead of assumptions. Instead of immediately assuming the worst, you get genuinely curious about what might really be happening. I wonder what's going on for them right now. I wonder if they're dealing with something I don't know about. I wonder if there's another way to interpret this situation. Curiosity keeps you open and flexible instead of defensive and reactive. It allows you to gather more information before drawing conclusions. It helps you approach situations with compassion instead of judgment. And often this curiosity reveals that what seemed like a personal attack was actually someone reaching out for help in clumsy ways, expressing their own pain, or simply having a very human moment of imperfection. Practice this rule consistently, and you'll be amazed at how much more peaceful your relationships become. You'll stop creating drama where none exists. You'll stop taking on emotional burdens that aren't yours. You'll stop making other people's struggles about your inadequacy. Most importantly, you'll start showing up as the calm, centered, emotionally intelligent person you're capable of being. Chapter 7. Learning to read between the lines. Every interaction with another person is like receiving a coded message. They think they're telling you about you, but they're actually telling you about themselves. Learning to decode these messages gives you a superpower that protects you from taking things personally, while giving you incredible insight into navigating relationships more effectively. Let's start with criticism, because this is where most people get emotionally derailed. When someone criticizes you, they're revealing their standards, their values, their expectations. They're showing you what they focus on, what they worry about, what they think matters most. This information tells you volumes about them and very little about you. Someone who constantly criticizes others' work ethic probably carries deep anxiety about their own productivity. Someone who frequently points out others' mistakes likely has perfectionist tendencies and is probably brutal with themselves internally. Someone who always finds something to complain about is usually dealing with their own dissatisfaction and unhappiness. But here's where it gets really interesting. The specific content of someone's criticism reveals their own wounds and insecurities. If someone calls you selfish, they're probably wrestling with guilt about their own self-centered behavior. If someone accuses you of being irresponsible, they're likely feeling out of control in their own life. If someone says you're not good enough, they're almost certainly battling their own feelings of inadequacy. This is projection in its purest form. And once you learn to spot it, criticism loses its power to hurt you. The more emotionally charged someone's criticism is, the more it's about their own unresolved pain. Constructive feedback is calm, specific, focused on behavior. Personal attacks are emotional, vague, focused on character. When someone crosses the line from feedback to attack, they've just revealed everything about their own inner turmoil. Now, let's decode praise, because this is equally revealing. The things people compliment you on tell you what they value, what they wish they had more of, what they're drawn to in others. Someone who consistently praises your confidence probably struggles with self-doubt. Someone who always comments on your independence likely wishes they had more freedom in their own life. Someone who admires your authenticity is probably exhausted from pretending to be someone they're not. Understanding this doesn't diminish genuine praise. It just helps you receive it without becoming dependent on it for your sense of worth. Let's talk about emotional reactions, because these are perhaps the most revealing of all. The intensity of someone's emotional response to your behavior is directly proportional to how much that behavior triggers something unresolved in their psyche. If someone gets disproportionately angry about something minor, if they seem unusually hurt by something that shouldn't be that big a deal, if they react with more emotion than the situation warrants, you're witnessing their trigger, not your mistake. For example, if you're 5 minutes late and someone becomes furious, their anger isn't really about those 5 minutes. It might be about feeling disrespected, abandoned, or unimportant. Those feelings are coming from their past experiences, their relationship patterns, their core wounds. Your lateness was just the match that lit a fire that was already built. This is why the same behavior gets completely different reactions from different people. You can communicate directly, and one person will appreciate your honesty while another feels attacked. You can set a boundary, and one person will respect it while another takes it as personal rejection. The difference isn't in what you did. The difference is in what each person brings to the interaction based on their history and healing. People's communication styles also reveal massive amounts about their internal landscape. Someone who communicates through guilt trips and manipulation probably learned that direct communication doesn't work, possibly because they were raised in an environment where their needs weren't heard or respected. Someone who avoids conflict at all costs likely has a deep fear of abandonment or rejection. Someone who always needs to be right probably has profound insecurities about their intelligence or value. Understanding these patterns helps you respond more effectively. When someone tries to guilt trip you, you can recognize it as their learned strategy for getting needs met, not as accurate information about your character. When someone avoids difficult conversations, you can see it as their fear, not as evidence that they don't care about you. Even the way people treat others tells you everything about how they treat themselves. Kind people are kind to themselves. Critical people criticize themselves harshly. Impatient people are impatient with their own mistakes. Judgmental people judge themselves brutally. Compassionate people have learned to have compassion for their own struggles. This insight completely transforms how you interpret behavior toward you. When someone is consistently harsh, it's not because you deserve harsh treatment. It's because harshness is their default setting, probably learned from how they were treated or how they learned to treat themselves. Here's the most liberating realization. People's behavior toward you is much more about their current emotional state, their past experiences, their unconscious patterns, and their learned coping strategies than it is about anything you've said or done. This doesn't mean your behavior never impacts others. It doesn't mean you're never responsible for your actions. It means the intensity and nature of their reactions are filtered through their own psychological makeup. Once you truly understand this, other people's behavior becomes fascinating instead of threatening. Instead of taking everything personally, you become curious about what their reactions reveal. Instead of getting defensive, you develop empathy for the struggles driving their behavior. Instead of making it about you, you recognize it as information about them. Chapter 8. Creating invisible walls that protect your peace. Imagine having an invisible barrier around you that allows love, kindness, and genuine connection to flow through freely while deflecting criticism, negativity, and other people's emotional chaos. This isn't fantasy. This is what emotional boundaries look like when you know how to create and maintain them properly. Most people think boundaries are about keeping others out, but healthy emotional boundaries are actually about keeping yourself in. They're about maintaining your own emotional center regardless of what's swirling around you. The first boundary you need is what I call the responsibility line. This is the clear division between what's your responsibility and what belongs to other people. You're responsible for your own emotions, reactions, choices, and behavior. You're not responsible for other people's emotions, reactions, choices, or behavior. This sounds obvious, but most people violate this boundary constantly. When your friend is upset, you're responsible for being caring and supportive. You're not responsible for making them feel better. When your colleague is stressed, you're responsible for being professional and helpful. You're not responsible for managing their stress. When your family member is disappointed in your choices, you're responsible for being respectful and understanding. You're not responsible for making choices that meet their expectations. The responsibility boundary protects you from taking on emotional burdens that were never yours to carry. It prevents you from feeling guilty about other people's reactions to your healthy choices. It stops you from trying to control outcomes that are beyond your influence. The second crucial boundary is the interpretation boundary. This is your right to interpret situations through your own lens rather than automatically accepting other people's version of reality. When someone tells you that you're selfish, you don't have to accept that interpretation. When someone says you've hurt their feelings, you can acknowledge their feelings without accepting responsibility if you acted with good intentions and appropriate behavior. This boundary is especially important with manipulative people. Some people will tell you you're mean, selfish, or wrong whenever you don't do what they want. They'll frame your boundaries as attacks, your self-care as selfishness, your independence as rejection. The interpretation boundary allows you to say, I understand that's how you see it, but that's not my intention or my experience. The third boundary is the energy boundary. This protects your emotional and mental energy from being drained by other people's drama, negativity, or emotional volatility. Energy boundaries mean you don't absorb other people's moods. You don't take on their anxiety, depression, or anger as your own. You can be present and supportive without becoming emotionally tangled in their problems. Energy boundaries look like leaving conversations that consistently drain you. They look like limiting time with chronic complainers or drama creators. They look like refusing to engage in gossip, negativity, or circular conversations that go nowhere. They look like protecting your peace as fiercely as you would protect your physical health. The fourth boundary is the standards boundary. This is your right to have standards for how you're treated and to maintain those standards regardless of other people's reactions. You have the right to be spoken to respectfully. You have the right to have your time valued. You have the right to be treated with basic courtesy and consideration. These aren't unreasonable demands. They're minimum requirements for healthy relationships. Standards boundaries mean you don't accept being yelled at, insulted, manipulated, or consistently disrespected. Even if the other person claims they're having a bad day or going through something difficult. Their struggles explain their behavior, but don't excuse it. You can have compassion for their situation while still maintaining your standards for how you're treated. The most challenging part of creating boundaries is dealing with other people's reactions to them. When you start protecting your emotional space, some people won't be happy. They might accuse you of being selfish, mean, or uncaring. They might increase their emotional pressure, trying to guilt you back into your old patterns. They might even threaten to end the relationship if you don't return to absorbing their emotions. Here's what you need to understand. Their reaction to your boundaries is information about the relationship, not evidence that your boundaries are wrong. Healthy people respect boundaries. They might need time to adjust to new dynamics, but they ultimately appreciate clarity. People who become angry, manipulative, or punitive, when you set boundaries, are showing you that they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries and don't want that dynamic to change. Setting boundaries doesn't mean becoming cold or disconnected. You can still be loving, supportive, and engaged while maintaining your emotional protection. In fact, boundaries often improve relationships because they allow you to show up more authentically and consistently. When you're not constantly drained, resentful, or walking on eggshells, you can be more genuinely present and caring. The key to maintaining boundaries is consistency. You can't have boundaries sometimes and not others. You can't enforce them with some people, but not others. People need to know what to expect from you, and you need to know that you'll protect your own well-being regardless of external pressure. Strong boundaries require you to be comfortable with other people's discomfort. You have to be willing to let others be upset with your choices, disappointed in your decisions, or unhappy with your limits. This is perhaps the most difficult part of boundary setting, but it's also the most liberating. When you can let others have their reactions without making those reactions your problem, you become truly free. Chapter 9. Transforming Criticism into Rocket Fuel. Criticism doesn't have to be your kryptonite. In fact, it can become one of your most powerful catalysts for growth and transformation, but only if you know how to process it without letting it pierce your sense of worth. The difference between people who are crushed by criticism and those who use it to skyrocket forward lies entirely in how they interpret and respond to feedback. Let's start by understanding that not all criticism is created equal. There are two fundamentally different types, and learning to distinguish between them is crucial. Constructive criticism comes from genuine care and a desire to help you improve. It's specific, actionable, focused on behavior rather than character. It's delivered with respect and consideration for your dignity. This type of feedback is pure gold, even when it stings initially. Destructive criticism, on the other hand, flows from the critic's own pain, insecurity, or need to feel superior. It's vague, personal, attacking your character rather than addressing specific behaviors. It's delivered with the intention to wound, diminish, or control rather than to help. This type tells you nothing useful about yourself and everything about the person delivering it. The first step in handling criticism without taking it personally is learning to tell these two apart. Ask yourself, is this feedback specific and actionable or vague and attacking? Is it focused on my behavior or my identity? Is it delivered with respect or with the intention to hurt? Is this person qualified to give this feedback, or are they speaking from their own unresolved wounds? When you receive constructive criticism, even if it stings initially, you can extract the valuable information without making it mean anything about your fundamental worth. Someone pointing out that you interrupted them during the meeting isn't saying you're a bad person. They're giving you information about a specific behavior that affected them. Someone suggesting you could be more thorough in your reports isn't attacking your intelligence. They're helping you understand their expectations more clearly. The key is separating the information from the emotion. Yes, it might hurt to hear that you're not meeting someone's expectations or that your behavior had a negative impact. That hurt is completely normal and doesn't mean you're taking it personally. Taking it personally would be making that feedback mean you're fundamentally flawed, unworthy, or doomed to fail. Here's a powerful reframe that changes everything. Instead of hearing criticism as "you're wrong," hear it as "here's another perspective," or "here's some information about impact." Instead of interpreting feedback as an attack on your character, receive it as data about how you can be more effective, more considerate, or more skilled. This doesn't mean you accept all criticism as gospel truth. Some feedback is inaccurate, unfair, or based on misunderstandings, but you can consider it without being destroyed by it. You can evaluate whether there's any validity without making your self-worth dependent on being perfect or never receiving negative feedback. When dealing with destructive criticism, the skill is recognizing it for what it is and not allowing it to penetrate your emotional armor. If someone calls you worthless, lazy, or stupid, that's not feedback. That's them projecting their own inner darkness onto you. If someone attacks your character rather than addressing specific behaviors, they're not trying to help you improve. They're trying to make themselves feel better by making you feel worse. With destructive criticism, your job is not to find the grain of truth or use it for growth. Your job is to recognize it as toxic and protect yourself from absorbing it. You can acknowledge that they're entitled to their opinion without making their opinion your reality. One of the most powerful tools for processing criticism without taking it personally is the 24-hour rule. When you receive difficult feedback, especially if it triggers strong emotions, commit to not making any major decisions or drawing any permanent conclusions about yourself for at least 24 hours. This gives your initial emotional reaction time to settle and allows your rational mind to engage with the feedback more objectively. During those 24 hours, ask yourself important questions. What specific behavior was mentioned, and is that behavior something I want to change? Is there a pattern here that I've heard from multiple sources? What would I tell a dear friend who received this same feedback? How can I use this information to become better without making it mean I'm currently bad? Another crucial skill is learning to thank people for constructive criticism, even when it's difficult to hear. This doesn't mean you're agreeing with everything they said or admitting fault. It means you're appreciating their willingness to give you potentially useful information. Thank you for that feedback is a powerful response because it keeps the conversation productive and shows that you're secure enough to consider other perspectives. When criticism triggers shame, remember that shame is always disproportionate to the situation. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am something wrong. Guilt is about behavior and can motivate positive change. Shame is about identity and only motivates hiding, defending, or attacking. If criticism is making you feel fundamentally flawed as a person, you've moved from processing feedback to taking it personally. The growth mindset is essential for handling criticism well. People with a growth mindset believe that abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort and learning. They see criticism as information that can help them improve. People with a fixed mindset believe that abilities and intelligence are static traits. They see criticism as evidence that they're not good enough and probably never will be. When you operate from a growth mindset, criticism becomes fuel for development rather than evidence of inadequacy. A missed deadline becomes information about time management skills that can be improved, not proof that you're irresponsible. A relationship conflict becomes data about communication patterns that can be refined, not evidence that you're unlovable. Here's the ultimate reframe. Criticism is not about your worth. It's about your effectiveness. Someone pointing out ways you could be more effective is actually showing you the pathway to greater impact and success. They're giving you a roadmap for improvement that many people never receive because others are too polite, too uncomfortable, or too busy to offer honest feedback. The most confident people actively seek criticism because they know it's how they grow. They ask for feedback regularly. They create safe spaces for people to be honest with them. They separate their ego from their performance because they understand that excellence requires constantly identifying and addressing areas for improvement. Chapter 10. Thriving in the workplace. Without losing yourself, the workplace presents unique challenges for not taking things personally, because your professional identity, financial security, and career advancement all feel like they're on the line. When a boss criticizes your work, when a colleague undermines your project, when you're passed over for promotion, it can feel like your entire future is being threatened. But this is exactly when the skill of not taking things personally becomes most valuable and most difficult to maintain. Let's start with the most common workplace trigger: receiving criticism or negative feedback from supervisors. Your manager points out errors in your work, questions your approach, or suggests improvements. The old version of you would immediately spiral into catastrophic thinking. They Think I'm incompetent. I'm going to get fired. I'm a failure. Maybe I'm not cut out for this job. The new version of you understands that feedback is information, not a verdict on your worth as a person. Professional feedback is almost always about specific behaviors, skills, or outcomes, not about your character or value as a human being. When your manager says your presentation needs more data, they're not saying you're stupid. When they suggest you improve your time management, they're not saying you're lazy. When they point out communication issues, they're not saying you're a bad person. They're giving you information about how to be more effective in your role. The key is separating your professional performance from your personal identity. You are not your job. Your work output does not define your worth. Your current skill level is not a permanent reflection of your potential. This separation allows you to receive professional feedback as valuable information for growth rather than as attacks on your character. Understanding workplace dynamics helps tremendously. Most criticism from supervisors isn't personal, it's systemic. They have their own pressures, deadlines, and performance metrics they need to meet. Their feedback to you is often driven by pressure they're receiving from above, organizational changes, or external factors that have nothing to do with your individual performance. When your boss seems unusually critical or demanding, look at the bigger picture. Are they dealing with budget pressures? Getting pressure from their own supervisor? Is the company going through changes? Are there industry pressures affecting everyone? Often, what feels like personal criticism is actually them trying to manage organizational stress, and you happen to be on the receiving end. Colleague relationships present different challenges because the power dynamics are more equal, which can make conflicts feel more personal. When a coworker takes credit for your idea, when someone talks over you in meetings, when a colleague is passive-aggressive or openly competitive, it's easy to take these behaviors personally. The reality is that workplace behavior is almost always driven by people's own career insecurities, their communication style, their cultural background, their stress level, or their learned patterns of professional interaction. The colleague who constantly interrupts might have grown up in a family where interrupting was normal communication. Or they might be so anxious about appearing competent that they overcompensate in meetings. The person who takes credit for your work might be insecure about their own contributions and trying desperately to prove their value. This doesn't make their behavior acceptable, but understanding the likely motivations helps you respond strategically rather than emotionally. Instead of taking it personally and creating drama, you can address the behavior directly and professionally. Office politics is another area where not taking things personally is crucial. You might not be included in certain meetings, invited to specific events, or considered for particular projects. While these exclusions can feel deeply personal, they're usually about organizational dynamics, budget constraints, role definitions, or simply logistics. When you're not included in something, instead of assuming it's because people don't like you or value your contributions, consider practical explanations. Was it a meeting for a specific department? Was it about topics outside your role? Was it a small working group focused on a particular project? Are there budget or space limitations? Often, what feels like personal rejection is actually just business logistics. Performance reviews are particularly triggering because they feel like formal judgments of your worth. But performance reviews are organizational tools designed to align your efforts with company objectives, identify development opportunities, and document your growth. They're not personal report cards on your value as a human being. Even negative performance reviews are usually about the gap between your current performance and the role requirements, not about your potential or worth. They're roadmaps for improvement, not verdicts on your capabilities. The most successful people use performance reviews as data for professional development rather than evidence of their inadequacy. Workplace rejection, like not getting a promotion or being turned down for a new opportunity, can feel intensely personal. But hiring and promotion decisions are based on numerous factors: budget constraints, organizational needs, timing, specific skill requirements, cultural fit with particular teams, or simply other candidates who might be better matches for that specific role at that specific time. Not getting a promotion doesn't mean you're not promotable. Not being selected for a project doesn't mean you're not capable. Not being hired for a position doesn't mean you're not valuable. The most challenging workplace situation is dealing with genuinely difficult colleagues or toxic environments. Some people are chronically negative, they undermine others, they're inconsistent or unreliable. They create conflict wherever they go. Remember that difficult people are difficult with everyone. Their behavior is about their own issues, not about anything specific to you. The colleague who's always critical is critical of everyone. The person who's unreliable fails to follow through with everyone. You're not being singled out. You're just experiencing their consistent patterns. This understanding helps you develop appropriate professional strategies, clear documentation, consistent boundaries, minimal personal interaction, and focusing on what you can control rather than trying to change them. Building workplace resilience requires understanding that your career is a long-term journey, not a series of personal victories and defeats. One bad review, one missed promotion, one difficult project, or one challenging boss doesn't define your professional future. The most successful professionals treat workplace challenges as opportunities to develop resilience, improve skills, and clarify their career goals. They use criticism to become better at their jobs. They use difficult relationships to practice professional communication and boundary setting. They use setbacks to reassess their priorities and redirect their efforts more effectively. Chapter 11. Building confidence that can't be borrowed or broken. Authentic confidence is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in personal development. Most people think confidence means never feeling doubt, always knowing what to do, or being naturally charismatic. But true confidence isn't about being perfect or never experiencing insecurity. It's about having such a solid relationship with yourself that external opinions can't fundamentally shake your sense of who you are and what you're capable of. The difference between authentic confidence and borrowed confidence is crucial. Borrowed confidence is based on external validation, achievements, and comparison to others. It fluctuates wildly based on circumstances. You feel confident when people praise you, when you're successful, when things are going well. You lose confidence when people criticize you, when you fail, when things get difficult. This type of confidence is a sandcastle, always vulnerable to being washed away by the next wave of external feedback. Authentic confidence, on the other hand, is based on self-acceptance, internal validation, and a deep understanding of your own worth that isn't dependent on external circumstances. It remains stable, regardless of what others think, say, or do. It's not about thinking you're perfect. It's about accepting yourself completely, including your imperfections, and trusting your ability to handle whatever life brings. Building authentic confidence starts with developing an honest, compassionate relationship with yourself. This means acknowledging both your strengths and your areas for growth without making either one define your fundamental worth. You can recognize that you're not skilled at something without making that mean you're a failure. You can celebrate your talents without needing to be the best at everything. Self-awareness is the foundation. You need to know who you are, your values, your strengths, your limitations, your triggers, your patterns, your dreams, your fears. This self-knowledge allows you to make decisions from authenticity rather than from the need to impress others or meet external expectations. When you truly know yourself, other people's opinions become interesting information rather than threats to your identity. Authentic confidence also requires accepting that you're a work in progress. Confident people aren't people who've arrived at perfection. They're people who are comfortable with the process of growth. They can admit when they don't know something without feeling ashamed. They can make mistakes without their self-worth crashing. They can receive feedback without becoming defensive. They can try new things without needing to excel immediately. This growth mindset is liberating because it means you never have to pretend to be more than you are or defend yourself against the truth of your current limitations. You can be honest about your skill level, your experience, your knowledge, because your worth isn't dependent on being perfect. Another crucial component is developing your own internal validation system. Instead of constantly seeking approval from others, you learn to recognize and appreciate your own efforts, progress, and positive qualities. You become your own cheerleader instead of relying on others to tell you when you're doing well. This doesn't mean ignoring feedback or becoming arrogant. It means developing the ability to validate your own experiences before seeking external confirmation. When you accomplish something, you take a moment to acknowledge your effort. When you handle a difficult situation well, you give yourself credit. When you grow or learn something new, you celebrate that growth internally. Internal validation also means trusting your own perceptions and experiences. If someone tells you you're too sensitive, but you know your emotional awareness is actually one of your strengths, you trust your own understanding. If someone suggests you're not leadership material, but you know you've successfully led projects and teams, you trust your own experience over their opinion. Authentic confidence requires being comfortable with being disliked or misunderstood by some people. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect because we're wired for acceptance and belonging. But the truth is that if you're living authentically, if you're being true to your values, some people won't like you. And that's not only okay, it's necessary. Universal likability is impossible and would require you to be so bland that you'd lose all personality and authenticity. The people who matter will appreciate your authenticity. The people who only like you when you're pleasing them aren't really connecting with the real you anyway. Chapter 12. Staying close without losing yourself. One of the biggest fears people have about not taking things personally is that they'll become cold, emotionally distant, or unable to maintain close relationships. This fear keeps many people trapped in emotional codependency, believing that love requires absorbing others' pain and making their problems your own. But this couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, the ability to stay emotionally connected without becoming emotionally contaminated is the hallmark of mature, healthy relationships. Emotional contamination happens when you absorb other people's emotions as if they were your own. You feel anxious when they're anxious, depressed when they're depressed, angry when they're angry. You lose track of where their emotions end and yours begin. While this might feel like empathy or love, it's actually a form of emotional dysfunction that helps no one and often makes situations significantly worse. True empathy is the ability to understand and care about someone else's emotional experience without taking on that emotion yourself. It's feeling with someone, not feeling as someone. When you practice true empathy, you can be present for someone's pain without being consumed by it. You can offer support and comfort while maintaining your own emotional center. The difference is crucial. When you absorb someone else's anxiety, you now have two anxious people instead of one calm person who can think clearly and offer genuine help. When you take on someone else's depression, you become another person who needs support rather than someone who can provide it. When you match someone's anger with your own, you escalate conflict instead of resolving it. Staying connected without contamination starts with understanding that each person is responsible for their own emotional experience. You can care deeply about someone's struggles without making those struggles your own. You can be supportive and loving without sacrificing your own emotional well-being. In fact, maintaining your emotional center allows you to be much more helpful and present for others. This requires developing what psychologists call emotional differentiation. This is the ability to distinguish between your emotions and other people's emotions, to stay connected to your own inner experience even when you're in close relationship with others. It's the capacity to be influenced by others without being overwhelmed by them. Emotional differentiation allows you to respond to others from choice rather than reaction. When your friend is having a crisis, you can choose to be supportive without automatically becoming stressed yourself. When your partner is in a difficult mood, you can choose to be understanding without letting their mood dictate your emotional state. One of the most powerful tools for maintaining connection without contamination is what I call emotional mirroring versus emotional matching. Emotional matching is when you unconsciously take on the other person's emotional state. They're angry, so you become angry. They're sad, so you become sad. This is reactive and unconscious. Emotional mirroring, on the other hand, is when you consciously reflect back their emotional experience without taking it on yourself. You acknowledge their anger without becoming angry. You validate their sadness without becoming sad. You understand their fear without becoming afraid. This is responsive and conscious. For example, if your friend is anxious about a job interview, emotional matching would be you becoming anxious too, maybe offering nervous advice, or catastrophizing about what could go wrong. Emotional mirroring would be saying something like, I can see you're really nervous about this. That makes complete sense given how important this opportunity is to you. What would be most helpful for you right now? The mirroring response acknowledges their emotion, validates it as understandable, and stays focused on supporting them rather than managing your own emotional reaction to their emotion. You remain calm and centered, which allows you to actually be helpful rather than adding to their stress. This skill is particularly important in romantic relationships, where emotional fusion is often mistaken for intimacy. Many couples believe that loving relationship means feeling everything together, sharing all emotions, being completely intertwined emotionally. While emotional connection is important, emotional enmeshment is actually destructive to relationships. Healthy couples maintain their individual emotional identities while staying connected. They can support each other through difficulties without both partners falling apart. They can share their struggles without making their partner responsible for fixing those struggles. They can be influenced by each other's emotions without losing themselves in those emotions. In parenting, this skill is absolutely crucial. Children need parents who can stay calm and regulated even when the child is dysregulated. A parent who matches a child's tantrum with their own emotional meltdown teaches the child that emotions are uncontrollable and overwhelming. A parent who stays calm while acknowledging the child's emotions teaches emotional regulation by example. The same principle applies in professional relationships. A good manager can acknowledge an employee's frustration without becoming frustrated themselves. They can understand the stress their team is under without taking on that stress as their own. This allows them to think clearly, make good decisions, and provide the leadership their team needs. Staying connected without contamination also requires understanding the difference between caring and caretaking. Caring is about genuine love and concern for another person's well-being. Caretaking is about trying to manage, fix, or control another person's emotional experience. Caring respects the other person's autonomy and ability to handle their own life. Caretaking assumes they're incapable and need you to manage their emotions for them. When you care for someone, you offer support, encouragement, and presence. When you caretake someone, you try to prevent their pain, solve their problems, and manage their emotions. Caring enhances relationships. Caretaking creates codependency. The most challenging aspect of staying connected without contamination is dealing with people who are used to your emotional reactivity. When you stop absorbing their emotions and taking on their problems, they might escalate their emotional expression, trying to get you to engage in the old pattern. They might accuse you of not caring, being cold, or abandoning them. This is where your commitment to healthy relationship dynamics will be tested. You have to stay consistent in your new approach even when others pressure you to return to the old patterns. You have to trust that maintaining your emotional center ultimately serves the relationship better than emotional fusion, even if it's uncomfortable in the short term. Remember that you're teaching others how to treat you by modeling emotional self-regulation. When you stay calm in the face of their emotional storms, you're showing them that it's possible to remain centered even during difficult times. When you refuse to take on their emotions, you're teaching them that they're capable of handling their own emotional experiences. Chapter 13. Handling the toughest people and situations. Now that you understand the fundamentals, it's time to develop advanced emotional immunity. This is about handling the most challenging people and situations that would have previously destroyed your peace of mind. Let's start with narcissistic personalities, because these are the people who can make even the most emotionally healthy person question their sanity. Narcissists operate from a place of deep insecurity, disguised as grandiosity. They need constant validation and will use any means necessary to get it, including making you responsible for their emotional state. They're masters of projection, blame shifting, and emotional manipulation. When dealing with narcissistic behavior, remember that everything they do and say is about maintaining their fragile self-image, not about anything you've actually done wrong. When they rage at you, they're not responding to your behavior. They're responding to the threat you pose to their carefully constructed self-perception. When they blame you for their problems, they're not giving you accurate information. They're protecting themselves from having to face their own responsibility. The key to maintaining emotional immunity with narcissistic people is understanding that you cannot reason with them, fix them, or make them see your perspective. Their entire psychological structure is built around avoiding accountability and maintaining their superior self-image. Instead, focus on what you can control: your responses, your boundaries, your expectations. Keep interactions factual and brief. Don't share personal information that can be used against you later. Don't expect empathy, fairness, or genuine apologies. Chronic victims present a different challenge. These are people who consistently present themselves as powerless and make everyone around them responsible for solving their problems or managing their emotions. They drain your energy with endless complaints and crisis situations, but they never actually implement solutions or take responsibility for changing their circumstances. The trap with chronic victims is that they trigger your compassion and desire to help. But helping them often enables their dysfunction rather than empowering them to grow. To maintain immunity with chronic victims, you must distinguish between someone temporarily struggling who needs support and someone who has made victimhood their identity. Real victims work toward solutions. Chronic victims resist solutions because solving their problems would end the attention they get from being helpless. Set clear limits on how much emotional energy you'll invest. Offer practical suggestions once, but don't keep repeating advice they won't follow. Don't take responsibility for their choices or their emotional reactions. Emotionally volatile people create chaos wherever they go. Their moods change rapidly and dramatically, and they expect everyone around them to adjust to their emotional weather. The mistake most people make is trying to prevent their emotional outbursts by walking on eggshells. This gives them tremendous power over your behavior and mental state. To maintain immunity, you must accept that you cannot control their emotional state and stop trying. Let them have their emotions without making those emotions your responsibility. Respond consistently regardless of their mood. Manipulative people are perhaps the most challenging because they're skilled at making you feel guilty, obligated, or responsible for their needs and wants. They use guilt trips, silent treatments, emotional blackmail, and playing victim to get you to do what they want. The key to immunity against manipulation is recognizing that a genuine request respects your right to say no, while manipulation punishes you for saying no. Healthy people accept your boundaries even if they're disappointed. Manipulative people escalate their pressure when you set boundaries, trying to make you so uncomfortable that you give in. Don't explain or justify your boundaries to manipulative people. Simply state your position calmly and refuse to be drawn into arguments. Remember that their emotional reactions are designed to manipulate you back into compliance. Family dynamics often present the most challenging test of your emotional immunity. Family members have years of history and established patterns. They know exactly which buttons to push to trigger guilt, shame, or obligation. With family, it's crucial to remember that blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to treat you poorly or make you responsible for their emotional well-being. You can love family members while still maintaining healthy boundaries with them. The most challenging family situations often involve guilt trips about traditions, expectations, and obligations. Family should always come first. You're being selfish. We sacrifice for you. These statements are designed to make you feel guilty for having your own life, needs, and boundaries. Remember that healthy families want their members to grow and thrive, not to remain enmeshed and codependent. Advanced emotional immunity requires you to be comfortable with other people's discomfort, disappointment, and anger. This is perhaps the most difficult skill to develop because most of us are conditioned to avoid causing others pain. But when you make other people's comfort more important than your own well-being, you give them enormous power over your choices and behavior. Developing this immunity doesn't mean becoming cruel or indifferent. It means accepting that you cannot live an authentic, boundaried life without sometimes disappointing others. It means understanding that some people's comfort depends on your discomfort, and that's not a price you should be willing to pay. Chapter 14. Your New Reality. This is where everything comes together. You've learned why your brain takes things personally, how to recognize when other people's behavior is about them, how to build internal worth that can't be shaken, and how to maintain boundaries that protect your peace. Now it's time to paint a picture of what your life looks like when you've mastered these skills. Imagine waking up in the morning without immediately reaching for your phone to check if anyone has responded to your messages, without anxiety about potential conflicts, without the heavy weight of wondering what everyone thinks about you. Your first thoughts are about your own priorities, your own goals, your own feelings about the day ahead. You're starting from a place of internal connection rather than external seeking. In this new life, your relationships are dramatically different. They're based on authentic connection rather than performance. You show up as yourself, not as who you think others want you to be. You share your real thoughts and feelings instead of saying what you think will get the best reaction. You set boundaries when needed instead of people pleasing your way into resentment. You support others without taking on their emotions as your own, because you're not constantly walking on eggshells or managing other people's reactions. Your relationships become much more relaxed and genuine. People feel safe around you because you're not reactive or defensive. They trust you because you're consistent and authentic. They respect you because you respect yourself. Your career takes on a completely different quality. You make decisions based on your values and goals rather than on what you think will make others happy. You speak up when you have valuable input. You take on challenging projects because you're excited about the growth opportunity, not because you're afraid of disappointing anyone. When you receive criticism at work, you evaluate it objectively. If it's useful, you implement it. If it's unfair, you don't internalize it. You can disagree professionally without taking the disagreement personally. Your decision-making becomes clearer and faster. Instead of agonizing over what others will think, you consider your own values and long-term goals. You can take calculated risks because you're not paralyzed by fear of judgment. This freedom extends to all areas of your life. You dress how you want to dress. You pursue hobbies that genuinely excite you. You spend your time and energy on things that matter to you, not on managing other people's opinions. Your mental and emotional health improves dramatically. The chronic stress of constantly monitoring other people's reactions starts to fade. Your nervous system begins to regulate. You sleep better, think more clearly, and have more energy for what actually matters. The most profound change is in your relationship with yourself. You become your own best friend instead of your harshest critic. You speak to yourself with kindness instead of judgment. You trust your own perceptions instead of constantly doubting yourself. This doesn't mean you become isolated or indifferent. In fact, because you're not constantly defending yourself or seeking approval, you become much more present and available for genuine connection. You can listen without making their problems about you. You can offer support without taking on their emotional states. You can love deeply without losing yourself in the process. You also become much more discerning about who you allow into your inner circle. You don't tolerate poor treatment or dysfunctional relationships. You surround yourself with people who appreciate your authenticity, respect your boundaries, and support your growth. Your contribution to the world becomes more impactful because you're operating from authenticity rather than performance. You're not trying to be what you think others want. You're being who you actually are and offering your unique gifts. The fear that kept you trapped begins to dissolve. You realize that the things you were so afraid of, being disliked, being criticized, being rejected, are not actually threats to your well-being. They're just part of the human experience, and you can handle them. You develop true emotional immunity. Criticism bounces off you. Other people's bad moods don't contaminate your emotional state. Rejection doesn't crush your spirit. Conflict doesn't send you into panic mode. You become resilient, centered, and unshakable. Not because nothing ever goes wrong, but because you know you can handle whatever comes your way. This emotional immunity doesn't make you cold. It makes you more loving, because you can love without fear. More generous, because you can give without depletion. More supportive, because you can help without enabling. More present, because you're not constantly worried about managing impressions. Perhaps, most importantly, you become free to pursue your own path, your own dreams, your own vision of success. You're not limited by other people's expectations. You're not held back by fear of judgment. You're not trapped by the need for constant approval. This is the ultimate freedom. The freedom to be yourself, to make your own choices, to create your own life, to define your own success, to love and be loved authentically. This is what becomes possible when you stop taking things personally and start taking responsibility for your own emotional experience. This isn't just a nice idea or a temporary feeling. This is a completely different way of living that becomes more natural the more you practice it. The skills you've learned aren't just techniques to use occasionally. They're the foundation for a fundamentally different relationship with yourself and others. Your new life is waiting for you. It starts the moment you decide that other people's opinions, moods, and reactions are not more important than your own inner peace and authenticity. It starts when you choose to take responsibility for your own emotions while letting others be responsible for theirs. It starts when you decide that your worth is not up for debate regardless of what anyone else thinks or says. The tools are in your hands. The choice is yours. Your new life, free, authentic, confident, and emotionally immune, is waiting. The only question left is, are you ready to stop taking things personally and start living the life you deserve? Your transformation begins now.